Welcome. So this is the Doom 1 Episode 3 maps 4 through 6 design commentary. And before I begin, I just wanted to mention that there's a little bit of, you can see a little bit of my desktop to the left, and I'm sorry about that. The screen recording software I'm using, I think what happened is I must have moved my mouse cursor over and it accidentally moved the window a little bit over, but I noticed it at the start of the next level, so hopefully it's not too annoying. But anyway, this map is called The House of Pain. It's by Sandy Petersen, and supposedly, as are the rest of the maps that I'm going to show, and every map in Episode 3 is at least co-authored by Sandy Petersen, but the next 3 are all completely by Sandy Petersen, who, again, I said before, was, I think, hired 2 months before shipping Doom, so he did a lot in 2 months, and, it's been said many times, Episode 3 and his maps are not as well regarded, and this one I see a lot of mixed opinions about. I think it's one of his worst maps. This beginning area is kind of interesting. There's the zigzag walkways and blood falls, and then on the other side, coming out of the walls there, and then on the other side, there's some skulls or some other weird stuff, but supposedly this level was made to look like parts of the a body, and different parts represented different parts of someone's body, different organs and stuff, but I don't really see it. It's not map 2 in this episode where it was a giant hand and it was really obvious that it was a giant hand, and that level also, Slough of Despair, also had a more kind of coherent and cohesive mood to it. So regardless of whether you like it or not, it stuck to its idea, and I think this map is probably the worst at doing that. I'd say it most similar maybe to map 1, but map 1 is also very short. But so I found the old thread on Doom World where Linguisa, who is the site manager of Doom World, made a poll, and it was sort of like a Final Four brackets type situation where everyone voted on their favorite Doom level, and he wrote descriptions of each of these maps, so I'll read the description for this one. E3M4, House of Pain. Here's a fun bit of trivia for you. House of Pain is modeled after the human anatomy. I know, right? While you're busy scratching your head over what room is supposed to represent what organ, and exactly at which point Sandy decided to give up, or whether he even started, here's an overview of the map with regards to actual level design. By the way, I'm about to get stuck in one of these pits here. Very interesting design choice, giving me an invulnerability while also making me stuck, because it just means that I have to wait longer to die. So yeah. You expect in a lot of these maps more kind of tropes that have been embraced. If you play modern Doom maps, you expect certain tropes to not come up, inescapable pits or the thing that are really, really frowned upon, but it's easy to forget that they're everywhere in the first Doom. So yeah, especially Sandy Petersen levels, although I think there might even be some inescapable pits in John Romero levels, so I guess it hadn't been frowned upon at that point in time. So I have to reload the map. So while I'm doing that, here's an overview of the map with regards to actual level design. Doom mapper Hellbent once described House of Pain as Doom's Indiana Jones level, one big romping adventure filled with all manner of puzzle solving and mysterious imagery. The way it progresses and the sorts of encounters it contains make this comparison seem apt, although I might be more inclined to think of E3M4 as the final dumping ground for all of Sandy's disused ideas. in reference to that, I do think these two rooms, especially the previous room that I was in with those little columns and the toxic barrels, they have an interesting mood to them, and this is an interesting idea, letting you shoot through the window at these guys so that they don't come out and attack you. But it doesn't really come together very well in this map. But anyway, going back to the description, Linguisa says, even by his typical standards, it plays like a hodgepodge of experiments and aging scraps of sector, all sewn together under a weakly functional concept, and this almost seems to be its strength. There's a certain charm to the map that knows it's the filler of the bunch and plants its tongue firmly in cheek so much that we can forgive the incessant switch flipping and bizarrely set up door triggers. An interesting outing, to be sure. Now, I will say some of the switch flipping later in the map I do actually enjoy because it's kind of neat. But anyway, I'll comment on that when we get there. I think by far the biggest thing that distinguishes this map, well, one thing that I always remembered when I played this map when I was younger is that it gives you the rocket launcher right at the beginning. So it's kind of expecting already that you're going to, it's telling you you're going to encounter more enemies. And I think this is a trope of that I see to this day in slaughter maps and other things like that, more modern maps with tons and tons of combat, is they'll just hand you really high level weapon right at the beginning, not expecting you to get it into a secret or whatever. So if you're pistol starting, you can already be equipped. And of course you need to pick up ammo for that. I'm not sure how to get that invulnerability. I don't know if that's just a trap. I actually missed one of the secrets, which I kind of am embarrassed by, because I actually looked the secrets up in this map, but it's especially bad in the next map. I don't know. I'm playing sort of casually, and it's been forever since I played these maps. I do like how this is an outdoor area, and I think when I played it when I was younger, that stood out. Also, the texturing. I mean, I love the just goofy, completely strange and nonsensical texturing of episode 3 a lot, and episode 2. It's just very much Doom to me, and it represents, I mean, I said it before when I was talking about the previous map, but it just represents kind of hell and the idea of hell in Doom. I think the previous map did a much better, this room is kind of pointless. Here's the area that I think is the most memorable, because there's this kind of tableau of these this suffering man image, and guys being hung from their legs, and it's actually a texture. It's not an extra sprite. I really wonder if there was some kind of limitation for sprites or whatever. But the thing that I like about it, one, the lighting on the marble faces is pretty cool, and the architecture in this room is actually kind of neat, even though it is kind of big and empty. It has much more of a mood than really the rest of the level, but you're not really in this hallway for very long. You don't really return to it. You sort of do. There's one completely optional area that I'll go to, but yeah. But the thing that I like about that whole tableau is that's its own area. You can't get to it, and there's no enemies there, so it's kind of serving as a thing beyond the field of play, which, if you know John Romero's whole rules of design, if you can see an area, he would want you to be able to get to it. But this is sort of breaking that, and this is saying that, maybe that there's some kind of idea or story that exists outside the field of play, and you just kind of have to draw your own conclusions about what that might actually be. And I think that's really interesting. I'm sad that it doesn't really try and elaborate anymore on that. There isn't anything kind of else exactly like that. There's some moments that feel like there's a story or that it's building up to something. I think actually episode 2, map 4, also has some of that kind of feeling to it. But yeah, it's interesting. And it's one thing, again, that I would say, although I have seen quite a few people, mention this map as being memorable, it doesn't hold up with the design of the other maps. But of course, like, the thing about episode 3 is, even though it is frowned upon, there are, like I said before in the previous video, there are ideas here. There's stuff going on. There's things happening. It might not always be great. A lot of the ideas might be questionable, especially in this map. But you never really get a sense that it's completely run out of steam until maybe map 9, the boss map. But if you're playing for the first time, episode 3, map 9, but I'll talk about that when I get to that map. But if you're playing that map for the first time, the boss enemy is the big attraction. I don't really think this area is particularly good or interesting. It just seems kind of slapped here. Wow, I had a little dropped frame there. I think the problem with it just seems like just a random shapes in a square room. There's no real height variation. The only kind of interesting thing that happens is when you turn the corner and you're unleashing enemies. And that's one thing that I didn't mention earlier is really consistent among a lot of these Sandy Petersen maps is the enemies are just kind of constantly piling in out of either monster closets, or you open a door and there's a big encounter like this. This encounter, because the light level in that room is slightly higher and it's big and square and the other ones were sort of broken up, at the very least, it feels different. And that room to the right there is different because you kind of drop down to pick up something and hit that switch. I'm not even sure what it is that's in that it's in that pit. But yeah, this is I didn't even remember this area at all. And I played through this map a lot, but it's been a long time, admittedly. It is an optional area, but there are plenty of optional areas in Doom 1 that are fairly memorable, and this is not one of them. This might be one of the worst areas. As far as combat goes, this Baron being unleashed here is kind of a cool idea, because you're not expecting to fight him in such a small room here. And there is an invulnerability if you go through. No, there's a what's it called? Soul Sphere. But and I think that's appropriate because, again, it's kind of a narrow passageway here. I have all that BFG ammo that I'm not using, so but yeah, it's kind of a neat use. I like the again, that texture. It's similar to the one that was used in episode 2, map 8. 8 with the 8 with the Dead Barons. It's just a texture, it's not a sprite. Okay, I got the BFG in that room. Okay. Which I already had from map 3. But that's a nice little drop down. But this, I'd say this map really does have the mark of, like, in, my first map or amateur mappers in some ways, and then in other ways it doesn't really. The lighting in this room is kind of polished. It's an interesting idea, and that whole tableau is an interesting idea. So it's weird. It's and here's another Sandy kind of design trick. You step on the so I'm not sure if that red area is damaging or not. I can't remember. But you step in the blue area to activate to open the fake door, and if you step in the red area, I guess it opens this. It opens up a trap here, where monsters will come out. So it kind of nonsensical as a puzzle, but it's also kind of interesting. There's a lot of kind of weird ways that you activate switches and open doors in these Sandy Petersen maps, and you'll see it especially in the next couple maps. I'll point them out, and they're definitely ideas that might stem from kind of D&D dungeon design, where you're stepping in a strange place and activating something that you didn't expect. Here also the switches I actually like these switches here. 2 of them close the door and 2 of them open the door, and you can hear the opening the door sound effects. So it's kind of it's not like a substantial puzzle, it's just kind of there. But I feel like it adds something to the maybe the menacing nature of this map. There's some kind of system behind there's some kind of hell isn't completely structureless. There's some kind of structure behind it, and that the fact that whoever sort of built hell has an agency to create some kind of weird alternative structure, or there's a reason, and it's just not pure surrealism. Kind of makes it more scary in a way, because that it's it's intelligent or something. You can connect with it, which I really like, and I think that's also why maybe sometimes some of the maps in episode 2 in particular, and even episode 1, can feel creepier to me sometimes, because they're more sort of normal seeming environments that also are really kind of strange and unpredictable, and there's some kind of the fact that you're feeling that way in a more ostensibly non-hell typical environment kind of shows that I don't know, kind of highlights something. So yeah, there's a lot of little monster closets like these, and also the key placement is always very strange in Sandy Petersen maps like that. You oftentimes just find them in a corner. You'll notice it here where you just open up a door to open another door, which I guess goes well with the whole hell theme. But this is a thing that it's also in the Spirit World, map 28 of Doom 2. It's in Doom 2, map 2, or Doom 1, episode 2, map 2, where you just open up a door and then there's another key. But yeah, this invulnerability actually is pretty good to have. A lot of invulnerabilities, if you play more modern Doom maps, you don't really need oftentimes they're very generous about the invulnerability. There was one on episode 2, map 7 that I didn't even really know exactly what it was for. I guess for fighting a Baron. But here, this area damages you. So you really want it. And even though it does give you a bunch of medkits, there's also a Baron here, and there's a backpack. And I actually straight up died here, because I don't remember this map very well, and there are not there's not a lot of area to move around. I can either go back to, move back to the area with the damaging floor, or fall down into that pit below, which just has more pinkies in it. So for a map that maybe is just more quantity over quality of enemy encounters, that's actually a pretty interesting one. And it does. One thing I have noticed from playing a lot of these maps is just the sheer volume of the pinky demon enemies in Doom 1, because again, if you play modern Doom maps, there's a lot more variety, because they almost always use Doom 2 as the base, and Doom 2 has a lot more enemies. So they kind of use the pinkies as meat shields a lot, I've noticed, especially Sandy Petersen seems to. And that's also true in Halls of the Damned, map 6 of episode 2. And it's really kind of putting you into tight spots here. This is very reminiscent, and I always used to get it confused with Halls of the Damned, because there's an area that's like this, where there's like a raised switch, and then that lowers you into the fake exit. This is not a fake exit, but the architecture of the room is extremely similar. And I actually really do like this exit area. I even like that area with the med kits. It's not like conventional design by any means, but it's one of the reasons why I keep coming back to Doom 1. Is, I mean, it first of all, it gives you that invulnerability and a bunch of med kits. And it's kind of an unexpected, little brutal end to this map. And they're just moments like this where, you know, you haven't seen that blue texture at all, but suddenly it shows up in the exit. The lighting in that room is kind of nice. I love the teleporter exits in in episode 3 in general. So even though that this map has a lot of, I wouldn't even say bad, but like mediocre. I don't really know what bad means. It's because like mediocre is kind of the worst thing that you can be, or just boring. And there are definitely some boring encounters here. So I'm finally adjusting the window. So this map actually is pretty interesting. I'd even hesitate. Maybe the encounters aren't incredibly exciting, but I would almost hesitate to call this, I wouldn't hesitate to call this like an actually pretty good map. Like it's has a consistent theme. I really like that Sandy Petersen uses textures that are not doors for doors, but you know that they're doors because, you know, they have like the door trim on them. And almost all of the doors in this map look like that, so it's kind of consistent. And again, it kind of adds to the feeling like there's some kind of pattern or something behind the madness, but it's a pattern or a kind of architecture that you don't really understand, and that almost makes it more unsettling because it's being built with kind of different materials or something. There are a lot of these upside down crosses and symbols. I think I made this comment before. That door is interesting. I think I made the comment before that like Sandy Petersen is Mormon, so he probably has more invested in the idea of hell as like a bad place, and therefore, you know, would have more sort of emotionally invested in what his concept of hell would be, and some of the symbology and you know, like the upside down crosses he might see as, you know, being particularly evil. So there has to be something, you know, it has to be extra evil. And of course this is called the Unholy Cathedral, so it goes really well with that concept. I'm going to read one of the descriptions from that thread that I mentioned before. By the way, I liked that little area, and I like here, I mentioned this before, but I think this is a more artfully done example where you kind of turn the corner. I totally just rocketed myself. Where you turn the corner and you don't have to go that far down to unleash those two cacodemons. And there's no actual reason to do that, but it's a really good kind of captures what Sandy Petersen's design style is, which is just unleashing these enemies sort of as you turn corners, either through monster closets or through areas that have been blocked off like that. And I like that metal texture being used in that way, because it kind of distinguishes it. And here's another example of like weird pits that open things instead of maps. And those teeth are really cool. This area is actually really neat too, because it damages you. So it kind of expects you to run through it, I presume. Which you can do because there's a teleporter right here, and that sends you right to the center of the map. This map is also very reminiscent of the Chasm, the map in Doom 2, that if I ever do Doom 2 design commentary, I'll talk about. But once again, you see those textures of those hanging men. You have to step in a certain I'm not sure which teleporter you have to step in to activate barons here, but there are barons on either side of those walls that will come out. But maybe since I went to a fairly secret room, it gave me cacodemons instead. But it's a nice little puzzle here, one that I even figured out when I was a kid, but still appreciated. All those teleporter sectors will send you back to the center, except for the one that's blinking. So it kind of encourages you to, like, actually pay attention to details. And Doom is not something that is known for puzzles, so the fact that this kind of thing exists is kind of nice. Yeah, I really like the way that teleporters in this map work, actually. But yeah, okay. And this is the critical path right there. I'm not actually sure what the yellow key does, because I think I exit with the blue key. I missed a bunch of secrets in this map, and I apologize. I should have wandered around for longer. But it can be confusing sometimes. But yeah, let me read that description now. Sometimes it's hard to see the forest for the trees. Take Monster Condo, for example, when Sandy's master plan was to execute attacks on the player using isolated groups of the same monster type. Monster Condo is a Sandy Petersen map in Doom 2. A little known fact, it would seem, although everyone's experienced it. In Unholy Cathedral, the ideas aren't unified by one concept in this way, but there is a maliciousness to the layout. And teleporter set-off that often goes unnoticed. And this is to be commended when the author is often seen as a chaotic designer throwing caution to the wind. I don't agree with that. I think that this is actually a fairly unified map. It might not be unified in terms of combat, but I think this map is by far one of his most kind of consistent maps, and I would say there is the kind of a central concept. Just the central concept is the teleporters. This is an interesting little side room. There's a lot of rooms in Doom 2 that are like this, so this is one way that you can see some of the Doom 2 design tropes of, especially some of those city maps that Sandy Petersen designed coming up. So there are these crushers. These switches just open little secrets. Obviously, they give you a key, and you do need that key to exit, I'm fairly sure. And other ones will just give you little secrets. They give you extra items. One of them is a teleporter. I don't know. There's a lot of little details that, for somebody who seems to be so sporadic, the fact that he puts so much detail into the design of those doors, for example, that open up weirdly, which is often thought of as kind of a thing that people only do in player WODs, but it's right there. Yeah, and this teleports you back to the room with the demons. It goes back to what I was saying about there are lots of ideas here, and it's not really something that you see imitated or done well very often. I mean, I would say, like, those Doom 1 and Doom 2, the way it did projects, which explicitly try to sort of imitate the style of Doom authors, I would say that those do it pretty well. But as far as, like, Doom mappers who are just doing their own thing, you don't usually see this kind of creativity. And the fact that it coexists, that kind of unpolished creativity coexists, although I'd say this level is fairly polished. This is an interesting little encounter here too, with if you go in through the right, then you have to face the lava. That the fact that the unpolished sort of creativity coexists with the Romero maps, and some of Tom Hall's more high concept stuff, the variety and the fact that you just don't know what you're going to expect, and almost all the time, even when it's not polished, it's interesting. I like this trap here. It does give you like a BFG or something. I have tons of ammo, so I'm just using it here. It's kind of nice to actually have the occasion to use all this ammo. I like that they all come in through a pit there. It's like a pit of skulls, like it's channeling the demons from another realm. Because it's an unholy cathedral, after all. I don't know, that sort of unpredictability. It's one thing that I like about community projects when they're good, is that they'll bring a lot of different authors and different styles. And it's a thing that I feel like is missing, that sort of personalization between levels from modern games in general, modern first-person shooters in particular. And the fact that there are basic rules that are inherent to the maps, but there's also that sort of feeling that the rules could be changing at any time. And the fact that you don't really know what to expect, again, it can be a letdown. Like this episode, in comparison, like if you play, episode 3, map 3, or you're like playing through episode 2 and you play episode 2, map 2, and map 4, and you expect something really epic to come after that because those are early in the episode, and then you're kind of disappointed with things that are kind of don't sit well together or are underwhelming, then it can be a disappointment. But the way that I look back at it, I try and be more optimistic and say that this kind of, the fact that these things are together kind of adds to the charm, or at least to the overall feeling. Oh, the thing that I was going to mention is standing in that little light room opened up that room where the key was, and the fact that was a critical path. I really like that you had to go in that room and that it wasn't just a secret, because you feel like you're kind of going on a journey or whatever, and that's, in level design in general, that's one of my favorite things. So yeah, I'd say this map was good. Feel sad that I missed so many of the secrets, but I enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed playing back, and I enjoyed this map. So I was going to mention this the first time playing through. If you ever stream Doom 1, this fire blue texture here, which is just lovely and totally garish, will totally screw up the quality of like Twitch streams and stuff. It's really funny. I'm not sure exactly what it is. Here, this is a very Sandy Petersen. Okay, so going back to what I was saying, this was actually the first map that Sandy Petersen designed. He said in an interview, he kind of drew this out. And it kind of makes sense that this is where his strengths lie, because he would revisit this whole kind of setup with his city maps. I think honestly this is one of the best examples, because it's hell. It makes sense that the progression is kind of unpredictable. I think the Doom 1 textures are better, honestly. I don't really like a lot of the Doom 2 city textures, particularly like the brick. Some of the city brick textures are just kind of boring. And it's kind of what you would expect. Like there hasn't been a Doom 1 map like this. If you were playing through the first, the episodes up to this point. So you would kind of expect for there to be a map like this. It's kind of intuitive. That like, if you're going to experience hell and things are sort of breaking apart, they're not making a lot of sense, then it would make sense that you'd have this kind of bizarre, broken up map, where with these incredibly garish textures. And again, it's not just the fact that things are broken up or unpredictable, but that there's some kind of weird pattern to it, that almost makes it more unsettling. Like some kind of force is reaching out through the map or whatever, that's beyond the designer, and is fucking with you. It's not like You don't feel the hand of a human. You almost feel the hand of something else. And I like that sort of design where you really you don't feel that the designer is kind of guiding you through the experience, but you feel that there's almost this kind of malevolent force that is a little bit more, maybe it doesn't want to completely fuck you over, like maybe it wants to give you the opportunity for something, but it's fairly indifferent to whether you succeed or not. And if you succeed, it's going to be on its own terms and not yours. And that's it's an uncomfortable feeling. But it's something that this style of design, I feel like, makes it come across. And maybe one of the reasons why I keep coming back to Doom is that that's very much what the experience is about. Here's something. So this is like a trope that really will come up in slaughter maps and pretty much a lot of modern Doom maps, where monsters are unleashed on like another side of the level, and you don't notice them at first, and then they kind of slowly permeate through the level. And it's not really something that you see in Doom 1, but yeah, I would say this map is honestly one of the most influential, not just because it seemed to influence Sandy Petersen's later design, but also a lot of the ways that like slaughter maps and a lot of maps, modern PWAD, Doom modding community maps that have made since then kind of follow this map a lot. So yeah, I don't think it's the best map in Doom 1, but it's definitely, it's hard to ignore its influence. And I personally, although the texturing is not probably the way that it's been the least influential, I still really like the insane fucking texturing in this map. But yeah, let me read from the Doom. It's called April Agitation. I'll just put a link to the thread because it took forever for me to find it. So I'll put a link in the YouTube description. So this map is called Mount Erebus. Mount Erebus is the only genuinely outside map in all of Doom, made more impressive by the fact that it was designed in a version of the engine even less amenable to details in long distances than the V1.9, which is the last version of Doom we know today. Its texture scheme is legendarily garish. By the way, this is like, the way that I jumped into that is probably the way that, it's intended to trap you. It's not expecting, you're going up over that lift, expecting to reach those weapons, and then you get trapped among those monsters, and you have to fight really hard to get out. So I really like that. And we'll see what happens when I go down to that blue area later. But yeah, anyway. Its texture scheme is legendarily garish, with bright animated red and blue walls everywhere. But you could argue that this is what a visit to hell ought to look like, and it certainly strikes a lot of people as deeply unpleasant. E3M6 also utilizes the game's monster movement perhaps better than any other in the Doom level series. I don't know, like, if I would be that prescriptive, but it's certainly been influential. But that's he's saying what I just said. Yeah. So yeah, at the time that's something that maybe kind of a happy accident. Here's again that sort of malevolent design. You get closed off, you can't go back. This is a very Sandy Petersen thing. This room is kind of nice, like there's no apparent exit, and the stairs go up and down. It's just kind of it's like you feel like the stairway should be going somewhere. That blue area is where the secret is, and that little red area. You actually do have to go in to beat the map, so it's not actually hard to find the secret. It's a little bit harder to know that, like, you need to rocket jump to get to it, which I will be doing to finish this map. But I'll show you where the exit is anyway. I think I might have even walked by it earlier. maybe not. I like this little that little cube of skulls. I keep thinking that that's where the exit is in this map. See, I already like... It's been so long since I played this that I completely forgot what the progression is, which is kind of... It's interesting, and I know a lot of people... I've seen a lot of people talk about the maziness of Doom's design and like the feeling of like, oh, where am I going? It's so frustrating. But I don't know. That's like... Honestly, that's like what keeps me coming back to Doom more than a lot of other things, is I like that feeling of like not knowing exactly where I'm going or what exactly is happening. And there are a lot of cases where like if you're just in a large level and you hit a switch and you have no idea what it opens up and there's no real indication, then that's just frustrating and dumb. But most of the maps in Doom are not that big. And it's usually reasonably apparent where you have to go if you pay enough attention. It's not a skill that maybe is very emphasized with more modern design. And I think it's maybe part of the problem with Doom being remembered as this sort of brutal masculine shooter in the way that maybe something like Serious Sam is, because there's actually all this other stuff going on that kind of people might look at that and be like, well, this undermines it. But in order for you to say that it undermines it, you sort of have to accept the premise that that's really what Doom was about. And it's not even really easy to say what Doom is about. The fact that it is very much a game that formed in practice rather than something that was shaped. It was shaped organically rather than shaped through direct intention and the will of the designer. And I think that was very much the case with a lot of games in the 90s in particular, and 80s and 90s. But it's also like the reason why it works is id was very much determined to kind of work with what they had and make the most interesting thing that they could out of it. And it's very hard to kind of make something feel organic and unpredictable and also make it feel cohesive. And they at least achieved the former it really well. So I don't know. I think it's easy, especially you think about like indie game culture. There's a lot of emphasis on having an idea or a hook and having a concept and kind of sticking to that and expanding outwardly from that. And usually there's you're supposed to kind of break the rules and stuff once you've done that, but that doesn't really happen that much in Doom. Like it is, there are rules that are set up that you sort of figure out gradually, especially in episode 1 does a really good job of ramping that stuff up and being kind of a tutorial without feeling like one. But besides that, you don't really get that feeling. It's more like there's just kind of an interesting experience or feeling that they want you to have. And everything is kind of secondary. Any kind of coherency or logic that would place these things in any kind of comprehensible way is kind of thrown out the window, and instead we have this kind of organic mess of things. And at the end of the day, I mean, you can make fun of it and you can you can say that it's not it's clear that they didn't know what they were doing. But I mean, I think this is one of the reasons why a lot of indie games and stuff have trouble with being memorable, is they don't have that kind of breadth of experience where you feel like they're really kind of just letting the thing speak for itself and following the direction that it's taking them in. And you feel more often that someone is trying to kind of stick to a concept or whatever, and a lot of conflicting or contradictory elements that might make a thing hard to sell kind of get scrapped because there's so many games out there. So everything is so, divided into certain genres. And I think one of the big successes about Doom is that it is not really in a particular, it's in action, but it's horror, but it's also like has like some puzzle elements. Like you can't exactly fit it in a genre and say that it embodies that genre. And I know that people will say that about Doom, that it embodies the first-person shooter genre. But like if you actually play the game and look back and compare that to first-person shooters of today, you might be surprised with what you find. The fact that everything is so kind of categorized in these genres kind of makes it hard to have an experience that goes outside of that contradicts that sort of fights against that resists that, and I think it adds to an atmosphere that is very kind of boring when people get tired of stuff, and there's this sort of fatigue, but there's this freshness to Doom when, even though it's not perfect, even though there's a lot of problems with the design, that freshness is still there when you go back, and it's still there in episode 3, the supposed weakest episode. So stay tuned for the final episode.